Bienvenidos, bienvenidas. ¿Qué está pasando en Venezuela? What is happening in Venezuela? We're going to talk about the presidential election held last Sunday and, of course, give a little bit of background and history on this wonderful country. But first, this is Latina Literati. Always want a little bit of historical context, a little bit of background to understand the country that we're talking about today. What we now know as Venezuela, of course, was part of the indigenous groups that lived in South America for at least the last 15,000 years, settlements and city-states all over the landmass that we now call South America. Venezuela makes up about 5% of the landmass of South America, and it is now thought that 80 to 90% of all indigenous people would met their demise at the hands of the terrible illnesses that were brought by the Europeans when they arrived. So from Canada all the way down to Chile, you had millions of people that would perish, because imagine a continent where there wasn't anything as common as even a cold, all the respiratory diseases, let alone things like smallpox. There was absolutely no immunity to any of that, and we have all had a little taste of what it means when there's no immunity to something that is going through countries like wildfire. So you can imagine, and in the indigenous culture, when someone falls ill, everyone gathers around. So that is what would now be called a super spreader event. In any case, so you have very weakened indigenous people. In 1522, the Spanish arrive. They begin their conquest along the coast, follow the Orinoco River in, and of course slowly enslave the Indians to work on different agricultural and mining projects. Eventually they have pretty much wiped out though most of the indigenous people, and in the 1600s the Spanish and Portuguese bring in enslaved people from Africa. So that's, again, general background as to what makes up Venezuela as part of a bigger South American history. It's important to kind of have that as a backdrop. So the enslaved people brought over from Africa were brought over to work on vast haciendas of cacao, of cocoa, from which chocolate is derived. And even today, hundreds and hundreds of years later, Venezuelan cacao is considered some of the best in the world. And you will see denominación de origen, you'll see specific bars and groups saying this cacao comes from Venezuela. It's considered very high quality, although the cacao originated north of what we now call Venezuela. I thought it was also interesting that Venezuela, the name comes from, of course, not anything indigenous, but Venezuela, there was a cartographer named Vespucci who said that the houses on stilts in Maracaibo reminded him of his native home city of Venice. So it was originally called Venezuela. Venezuela eventually becomes Venezuela. I thought that was of interest as well. The great liberator of South America was, of course, Simón Bolivar. Born in Caracas to Spanish immigrants, he would, of course, like most Creoles, be sent to Spain to study, and that's where he comes up and begins to understand some of the ideas of the Enlightenment, which we have spoken to in the past, really came from the northern tribes, the Iroquois and other that had impacted the French. So it's kind of a full cycle in terms of the ideas of self-determination, of self-governance, of there being an equality in society. And so he brings these ideas back and immediately wants to start liberating South America from Spain. There weren't specific countries, they were just general administrative areas at that point in time. So after going to Nuevo Granada and some fighting, he's exiled to Jamaica. he makes his way to Haiti, and that's where he meets Alexandre Pétion, one of the revolutionaries in Haiti. You'll remember that Haiti is the first free nation of this hemisphere and the first Afro nation of this hemisphere. And what Pétion says to Bolivar, promise me that you will end slavery and I will help you. And so Simón Bolívar says, yes, I will end slavery. And so it is the Haitians that are able to provision a whole ship and give military aid to Simón Bolívar so he can then go back and continue the fight for freedom. So South American independence, that spark came from Haiti. Another reason to give gratitude to the Haitian people and the Haitian history of supporting freedom. So he comes back, he gathers an army, and the independence war begins. Once independence, in fact, Venezuela is one of the first countries to gain independence, and it joins what is called La Gran Colombia. So Colombia is made up of what would later on become various countries, and he even serves as president. So you have, as usual, infighting, and you have different interests at hand, and in the end they say that he was a bit disillusioned. But he is the liberator of South America, and in fact his name is invoked in speeches. He's an icon. He is seen as the figure of liberation for South America. So Venezuela gets its independence, and for the first 100 years it's mostly an agricultural nation exporting cacao and other products until oil is found. And Venezuela has one of the largest oil reserves on earth. What does that mean in the great game? It means all of a sudden Venezuela is of great interest to all of the powers that want to control the oil. So you have strong men, you have authoritarian figures for that first 100 years, and then you have different elected presidents that aren't able to do much because, again, you've got real corporate interests involved in the government, and you can guess that there would be conflicts and corruption as people vie for the different oil leases. And many say it is a collapse in the confidence of the existing political parties that in 1998, an officer is elected president. His name is Hugo Chavez. It's also of note that last Sunday, the day of the presidential election, was Hugo Chavez's birthday, July 28th. He would, of course, launch what was termed the Bolivarian Revolution, where the principles and the values and the focus on the government is going to be the people. And so you have an increased investment in education and infrastructure, in housing, and things are going well. I want to say, as a side note, there was a call to lawyers around the world to help in the redrafting of the Constitution, and it's really fascinating because in 1999, when this Constitution is approved, or when it's redrafted, it was considered the most egalitarian in this hemisphere, at least, if not on Earth. It absolutely guaranteed equal treatment before the law for men and women and indigenous groups. Imagine that. Imagine a Constitution that guarantees absolute equality before the law for men and women. Sounds like something like the ERA amendment that the U.S. Has been trying to push for many, many years. Venezuela already has it in its constitution. Venezuela sets up a ministry to provide opportunities and to overcome the past obstacles that women have had to deal with in the country. So a lot of investment in people, and Hugo Chavez is elected again and again and again until he passes away from cancer in 2013. The Venezuelan Constitution also guaranteed free health care, free education, a right to clean water and clean air, a right to housing. So these are really fundamental rights that you would expect any civilized nation to provide for its people. But most constitutions on earth don't include these things. So I think it's really important to recognize those things that were done well. So what happens? Hugo Chavez passes away in 2013. Nicolas Maduro is appointed interim president and is eventually elected president several times. And this past Sunday, the Electoral Commission has said that he was elected again. And what are the issues? What's happening in Venezuela? And we've come to that now. So The opposition says that they have proof that the elections were not properly held, that there was fraud. We're waiting for the proof. We have not seen anything in the news as of yet. The Maduro government, on the other hand, says that it will be releasing precinct-level information, which it has done in the past, but said that there was a hacking attempt, shocking, interference in elections by hackers, shocking, and so it has taken them a longer time to do that. I should say that there were almost 1,000 observers from 90 different countries present at different precincts, and all of them concur that they did not see any irregularities. I think that's important. You have all of the usual suspects, all of the U.S.-sponsored states calling ambassadors and saying that the opposition won, and then you have those that are aligned with Maduro saying that they recognize Maduro as having won another term. So there's a lot here, and we have a lot more to find out about what happened, but there are a lot of passions, and there's been a little bit of violence, but hopefully things will calm down when both sides gets a chance to produce whatever evidence they have, and we can see what's really out there. But Venezuela is a country that is very, very wealthy. Unfortunately, the U.S. decided to apply sanctions. Sanctions have never worked. They didn't work in Cuba. They didn't work in Venezuela. They didn't work in Iran. They don't work. What works? Engagement. You want to build bridges, not walls. You want to see where the common territory is, or you want to come to common meeting of the minds. But again, there is a lot of economic interests, and it's so interesting because even though there were sanctions and Venezuela was being punished, so to speak, by Uncle Sam, when the U.S. needed oil, there was trade with Venezuela because the U.S. needed oil. So again, it's a very pragmatic dialogue and relationship with the South American country of Venezuela. We wish the Venezuelan people all the best, and that they are able to overcome the obstacles that they are facing currently, both politically and economically. There has been the greatest exodus of Venezuelans in the history of the country, most of them, many of them going to Miami, but they're all along the border of the United States with Mexico, which means that they are making their way through all of Central America and Mexico to try and apply for asylum in the United States. So if we can focus on what the issues are in Venezuela and work with the Venezuelan government, that would probably stem the tide, because nobody wants to leave their casita. Nobody wants to leave their home, especially when it's a paradise. And I'm telling you, South America is a paradise. Anyway, I am now turning to my favorite part of the video, the book recommendations. The first book that I want to recommend is Bolivar by Maria Arana. So you need to understand who this icon is, who this national treasure is, because he is central to not just the history of South America, but also the vision that is invoked in the Bolivarian revolution in Venezuela. So this is a great book, solid book on Simón Bolívar, his life and his work as El Libertador de Sudamérica, as the liberator of South America. The second book is more contemporary. It's Hugo Chavez, The Bolivarian Revolution by Richard Gott. And Richard Gott actually is on the ground during the Bolivarian Revolution, so he has a very up-close and personal relationship with what is going on during that time. And so fascinating to see all the details and the interviews that he's able to get and all the information, so that you understand what is the basis of the government that is currently in Venezuela and why is there opposition to it. Fascinating book, really recommend it, and I know that you'll enjoy both these books. So thank you so much for coming to the end of the video with me. Please check your local library, your local bookseller. We love our local libraries. We want to support our local booksellers. And as always, we'll leave links to independent booksellers in the description box in case you'd like to purchase these books, new or used. Thank you again, and we would love you to subscribe to Latina Literati if you haven't already. As always, con mucho cariño, mucho salud, mucho amor. Gracias.